thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Alexa Gasky. I'm an Assistant Director of Admission here at Gonzaga. And you may notice that we are in a webinar format, so you do not have the ability to unmute yourself, but we definitely want to ask your questions. So please, please, please use the Q&A function in Zoom to ask all of your questions, and we're going to do our best to answer as many as we can during our time tonight. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to my colleague in admissions, and then we'll have our financial aid folks introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Claire Silva. I'm an Associate Director of Admission and happy to be here tonight. I'll be answering questions in the chat. Thanks so much.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Kelly Wentz, and I am the Director of Financial Aid here at Gonzaga.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I am the Dean of Student Financial Services here. We are so glad you're here, and I will be helping out with the chat.
Hello, everyone. My name is Helen Van Blerkum, and I am the Office Coordinator in the Student Financial Services Office here at Gonzaga University, and glad to be here to help.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So again, my name is Kelly, and thank you for all of my coworkers being here to help out with the Q&A. So we'll definitely be watching those as we go. But as Helen mentioned, Student Financial Services is not just financial aid, but it also does encompass student accounts and student employment, as well as another number of other services that fall underneath the umbrella. But primarily, our job is to make sure that students and families have access to financial aid opportunities from federal and state programs, as well as private and institutional sources to help them meet with their costs so they know how they're going to pay for the institution. We also work to make sure that you understand the cost of attending the university and that you can make arrangements to pay your bills and have access to robust student employment opportunities. So that's just kind of a brief overview of what Student Financial Services encompasses overall. As you can see here on our agenda, we have a few things to cover. Really, a lot of this is about the FAFSA and the timeline of how delays in FAFSA kind of impact things, kind of the best steps that you can take to move forward through the process of if you have already started your FAFSA, as well as also if you haven't started your FAFSA, information that you're going to need to apply for financial aid, and then just some frequently asked questions that we have throughout the process that we receive quite often. But before we dive into all of those details, I really just want to take a moment to highlight our mission and our approach to assisting students and families with this process. And we are committed to Gonzaga's mission, and we hope that you do see that through our services and our policies. We see our role not only to assist you as students and families with these resources for attending Gonzaga, but we also want to be able to develop and educate students through the work that we are doing. We're committed to making this process as smoothly as possible, and we know that many of you are probably just as frustrated with the delays in FAFSA as we are, and do know that we are very frustrated with the processes as well, but also trust that we're working to prepare and think creatively about how to get this information to you as quickly as we can to make sure that you have an informed financial aid decision. We also understand that finances can be deeply personal. It's a big decision to make. And if you don't get your questions answered during this webinar tonight, or if other questions come up throughout this process, we want to make sure that you can contact us at any time. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. We do take a team approach to helping students. We are experienced, well-staffed, and committed to excellent service, and we really do take pride in our commitment to our students and our families. We know that financial aid is very confusing, and we are here to make it as transparent as possible and are happy to assist you throughout the process. So before we really get started, I just want to take a quick poll of who we have here joining us tonight. So are you a prospective student, parent or guardian, school counselor or administrator, or possibly some other role? So I'll give you just a few seconds to complete this poll. I think Claire's going to keep an eye on that for us. All right, Claire, do you know if are we close? We got about 50–60% maybe?
Yeah, we do. Let's take a look at what we got.
Awesome, thank you.
Can you all see that? So we have about majority of parents, about 75% of our students are parents, and 26% of our students are 26 are students.
Okay, perfect, great. Well, thank you all again for joining us. Oh, there we go. Now we got it.
There it is.
Thanks so much for taking that poll. I appreciate it. So to kind of dive right in, really what we want to talk about is basically just the summary of our timeline right now. You'll notice that there aren't specific dates on this, but this is just a helpful visual to understand kind of where we are in that process. The FAFSA was released in December, and a lot of families have kind of started the process. A lot of them have run into hiccups, and so we know that there's a lot of people at different places. Where we are is really kind of in that waiting period as well, of where we're hoping to get that financial aid information out to you as quickly as possible. One thing that's just recently happened just this week is that we recently learned that families will be able to begin making corrections to their FAFSA records in roughly mid-April at best. So with that news and knowing that there are still a lot of families that have to make corrections, our timeline has shifted again, with many families still having to make those updates or even add Gonzaga to their list of schools to receive information. So again, I just wanted you to know that we are committed to making this process as smooth as possible, and we're going to do our best and due diligence to make sure that we can get this information to you quickly. You'll see at the bottom of the slide, I think it may be cut off for me, but there are 2 links for those who may not have started their aid applications yet, which will bring us to our next talking point of who should apply for financial aid, or who can apply. So most Gonzaga students can use the FAFSA to apply for financial aid. The FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. This webinar is geared towards first-year students who are U.S. citizens or eligible non-citizens and eligible to apply for financial aid via the FAFSA application. If that doesn't describe your citizenship status, do know that there are other ways to apply. For example, the WASFA, which is the Washington Application for State Financial Aid, is available to specifically for low-income non-citizen Washington students that attend a Washington high school who are unable to file a FAFSA due to their immigration status. And then for those who might be outside of Washington state that are not eligible to complete the FAFSA, you have the ability to complete a needs analysis form to apply for need-based financial aid through Gonzaga. We're not going to go into detail on those 2 applications specifically. This really is a lot more about the FAFSA, but if you do need more information on those types of aid applications, you can certainly reach out to our office to make sure that we are giving you the information that you need in order to successfully complete those. So the other thing that's important along with who can apply is who should apply. We often hear from families that they don't want to do a FAFSA because they don't think they'll qualify for financial aid. And this is actually one of the biggest misconceptions in our work within financial aid. While it's true that not everyone may qualify for additional aid, you should absolutely apply if cost is a factor in where you are planning to attend. The FAFSA form is used to qualify for federal, state, and institutional financial aid, which is school-based aid. And you'll want to make sure that that's what you're completing to see if you're eligible for grants and work-study opportunities, as well as subsidized, which is the non-interest-bearing loan opportunities. We offer a wide array of need-based financial aid, including about $10 million in the biggest need-based program, which is the Gonzaga grant. So on average, our first-year students at Gonzaga receive $11,400 in need-based grants, and about 70% of the students who submit a FAFSA received need-based grants as part of their financial aid package. The median income for these families was $140,000. So that median is the midpoint, which means half of the families receiving grants had income higher than that $140,000. So grant eligibility isn't solely based on income, but we share this information with you to give you a sense of how generous the aid programs are here at Gonzaga. You should also do a FAFSA because some outside scholarship applications may ask you to complete the FAFSA, determine your need to see if in fact you're going to be eligible for those outside scholarships as well. And then again, if you intend to borrow student loans, you're going to want to complete a FAFSA for that as well. So again, FAFSA is the form that you need to fill out to receive financial aid from federal and state governments, as well as Gonzaga to help pay for college. And that form is maintained by the U.S. Department of Education, and over 17 million students each year use the form to apply for financial aid. At Gonzaga and at most schools, it's the only financial aid application that's required. Some do require the CSS profile, but we do not. And again, submitting that FAFSA is the most important thing that you can do if cost is a factor and you really need to know if a school is going to be affordable for you. To access the FAFSA, you just go to www.fafsa.gov. It's free, so you don't need to pay anyone to prepare it for you. And again, it is an annual form. So you're going to need to submit that FAFSA each year when it becomes available if you plan on to receive any federal or state aid, and again, that institutional aid moving forward. This year, that form is going to be based on your family's 2022 income information. And the output of the FAFSA this year has been changed to the Student Aid Index, which is what we call the SAI. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. So you may have heard the FAFSA has undergone some exciting changes and long overdue modernization. Unfortunately, anytime I think there's change, there's definitely things that are kinks in the system, and so there's definitely been some delays in the process. The Department of Education opened the FAFSA later than usual, and since then there have been multiple delays that has really kept them from being able to process the data accordingly. However, with that being said, even with those delays, there are some really great reasons for why they decided to make these updates to the FAFSA. The changes are a result of the FAFSA Simplification Act, and the purpose of that new law is to streamline the form and make it easier for you with students and families to complete that form. It's also expected to expand access to the federal Pell Grant program, meaning that more students will be eligible for more funding. So before we kind of dive into some of the Q&As that we get in regards to FAFSA, just a quick poll again. How many of you have already started your FAFSA or have completed your FAFSA? Give you just about a minute to answer that. Claire, how's that looking? Oh, wonderful. Look at all of those FAFSAs that have been done. That's awesome. I wish we had a follow-up poll question that was like, how many of you have successfully completed your FAFSA? Because I'm sure that some of you are still waiting for being able to make some corrections, but we'll talk a little bit about that too. So again, that label for the, the FAFSA is being changed to the Student Aid Index. That SAI is the number that we in schools use to determine your financial aid eligibility for need-based aid. One thing to keep in mind is that the timeline, and because of all of the delays and the changes to FAFSA, the application cycle for this year and probably even moving into next year are going to be a little bit bumpy. So we're in this together. We're going to be riding this roller coaster. That's kind of how we keep describing it in our office, is that it's kind of a roller coaster of information that we're receiving. So I keep telling people just to kind of buckle in and see where we land. So we're on this ride together. There are going to be fewer questions on the FAFSA and also smart logic to help you skip questions that don't apply to your family situation. So that's another one of the things that was a positive out of these changes for FAFSA. Information on the FAFSA will be transferred directly from the IRS to schools, and that is a significant improvement over the current processes. It will make it easier to verify students' eligibility and cause less work for both students and schools as they're moving through the financial aid process. And then finally, one thing to note is that there is some new terminology. The new FAFSA has contributors. So anyone who is asked to provide financial information on the form is going to be considered a contributor. For example, a student with married parents who file a joint tax return will have two contributors, the student and one of the parents. Both contributors will be asked to provide consent, which is another new terminology, and that consent is to be able to use their income tax information. So if the student's parents were married but filed separate tax returns, both parents would be contributors and need to both provide consent. So if you have questions about that, you can certainly list those in the Q&A. Again, if we don't get your questions answered today, you can always reach out to our office as well. So it sounds like most of you have actually started the process, which is great, but for those of you who haven't, one of the first steps to completing the FAFSA is to create that studentaid.gov account. What that is basically just your login information for everything that's going to be related to your financial aid. Each contributor to the FAFSA will need to have a studentaid.gov account. And again, if you're not sure who's a contributor, we do have a link that we'll share that provides you some information as to who that could be as far as who a contributor might be for you. One thing to keep in mind is that every individual needs their own account. Students and parents need to create their own individual accounts to apply for, receive, and manage federal aid. And just know that if you're borrowing loans and things like that, your studentaid.gov account is not just for completing the FAFSA. If there's any other financial aid paperwork that needs to be completed, such as like a promissory note or loan entrance counseling, you'll also be utilizing that account for that piece as well. And then again, the information that you're going to need to be able to complete that information and that set up that account is your social security number, mobile phone number, and or an email address. So again, we'll kind of briefly go through this because it sounds like a lot of you have already started completing the FAFSA. But ultimately, if you haven't done it, we do recommend that you complete it as soon as possible. The Department of Education estimates about an hour to complete the form, and it is really important that even though we want you to do it as quickly as possible, it's more important that you provide accurate information. So just make sure that if take your time with it, don't feel like that hour is the absolute cutoff. Again, it's also important that individual contributors are managing their own sections of the form. So while it may be tempting to share studentaid.gov accounts, it's strongly discouraged. Ultimately, the directions on the forms are geared towards the role you are logged in as, so your student, parent, spouse, whatever you are as a contributor. So if you're sharing that account, it can get confusing trying to track all of that information, and that's not a mistake you want to try and risk making on the form. The FAFSA is considered complete when both the student and parent sections are submitted and signed and submitted for processing. After your 2024-25 FAFSA form is submitted and processed, you should receive an email with instructions on how to access an online copy of your FAFSA submission summary. So that's kind of the output for students. Just know there really isn't a great timeline as to how long that's going to take from when you fill out your FAFSA to when you're going to get that. I mean, obviously there's delays in processing, but you should receive an email once it's completed. That form will include your estimated eligibility and also your student aid index, that SAI again, and whether or not you've been selected for verification. So as we've talked a little bit about already, there are quite a few known issues with FAFSA. We've just highlighted a few that we feel are really impacting parents and families right now. Some of the things that we've heard about is basically incorrect citizenship status, FAFSA signatures, if people had to like mail in signature pages or fill out a paper FAFSA because it wasn't allowing them to sign, parents without SSNs, and then again, most recently, the ability for students to make corrections is delayed until mid-April. So if you scan that QR code, it's kind of just a place where we go for alerts to see what other things are coming up and just kind of a pulse on all of the things that are going on with the Department of Education and the FAFSA piece right now. So going back to our original timeline overview, all of those issues are contributing to the delays in schools' ability to successfully get financial information out to you. Not just Gonzaga, but you're probably experiencing that with any other schools that you've been applying to as well. Again, we understand that this financial piece is a really big factor in your decision making, so trust that we are staying on top of each update that's released and working hard to get that information out as swiftly as possible. A couple of ways that we've assisted in making that easier for you and helping you in making your decision. If you're a newly accepted student, you can request an estimated financial aid offer if you haven't done so already. Ultimately, again, you can scan this QR code and it'll walk you through the process. If you don't even have an SAI calculated from FAFSA, you can still complete this process. So there's a place to indicate on there that you haven't been successful in completing FAFSA or you don't have a calculated SAI. And if you submit it like that, we'll send you a follow-up email letting you know what next steps you need to take in order for us to be able to successfully get this information to you. Another thing that we offer to kind of help assist in making your decision is we're offering one-on-one appointments for FAFSA help. If you're looking to make corrections, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get in any sooner than you are. But when you hear that you can make corrections to FAFSA and you do need additional help or just want us to sit with you, we offer Zoom appointments, we have phone appointments. You're welcome to come directly into our office and just know that we can do that one-on-one with you and your family in order to get those completed. And then finally, Gonzaga has extended the confirmation deadline to June 1st, 2024. So once we do and are able to get that information to you, you have a little bit more time to make sure that you can make that decision accordingly. So we're going to dive into some of the common questions. And to start, we'll start with the appeal process. So a common question that we get is, how does the school take into account a drastic reduction of income, or what if we have circumstances that may not be recognized on FAFSA? The FAFSA is going to require you to submit your 2022 tax information, and we're aware that might not be accurate reflection of your current situation. So we have a process to take that into consideration that we refer to as a financial aid appeal or a special circumstances appeal. You can see some of the common requests on the slide here that we do receive for appeal. There's a lot more information on our website as well. We're in the process of updating our processes for this current school year, but for the most part, you should have received information letting you know, and you should be able to see that coming pretty quickly. The first step, though, in order for us to even kind of begin having those conversations is, again, that estimated financial aid offer. We want to make sure that you can see what we have, and then also make sure that you're communicating with us that you might have circumstances that you need to communicate. Another common question that we get is, how will we share if there's multiple siblings in college with the new FAFSA? Will we consider this? And yes, Gonzaga will consider that through the appeal process as well. You'll see on here also tuition for other siblings, loss of wages, medical or dental expenses not covered by insurance. Again, there is definitely more information on our website for things that we can and also cannot take into consideration for this appeal process. Another common question that we get often is, what assets are you required to report? So you'll see here annual amount of child support received, net worth of business that you or your family own, the net worth of a farm, including the fair market value of land, buildings, livestock, unharvested crops and machinery, education savings accounts designated for the student, which we'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide. And then also what's not included, we want to make sure that you're not including the value of your primary residence, and then you're also not including your retirement accounts. So going back to that education benefit plan, anything that's basically specific to the student, if it's counted as a parent asset, if the account is designated for the student. Previously, if a parent had education savings account for other students, you would include those values as well, but the FAFSA changed that this year. So when you're reporting it on FAFSA for this, if it's the student that is attending right now and that's who you're filling out the FAFSA for, then that is the 529 that you would be reporting, not for any other person in the family. Other common questions that we get that aren't necessarily related to the FAFSA, but how do I qualify for work study? At Gonzaga, we actually use the terms work study and student employment interchangeably, and part of that is because students that are eligible for need-based employment will have it included in their financial aid offer. However, students that aren't offered that as part of their financial aid offer still have many opportunities to work on campus. Each year we have about 1,600 students that work on campus, and most of those are actually in a non-need-based work opportunity. So once you are reviewing your financial aid offer, if you don't see work study as an opportunity for you, just know that that doesn't mean that you can't work on campus. There are still lots of opportunity outside of that need-based employment. There are a lot of benefits to working while at school, and so we want to make sure that students have the opportunity to experience those benefits while they're here at Gonzaga. Another common question that we get are what other scholarships are available. If you're looking to see what other Gonzaga funding is available, your best option again is to complete that request for the estimated aid offer. That's going to give you a really good insight of what other funding sources are available for that scholarship piece. We do also house an outside scholarship database. So if you go to our website and do a search for scholarship database in the search bar, you'll see a list of all of the outside scholarships that we are aware of or that we get notified of. And then for those who are Washington State residents, the washboard.org is also another great resource for looking for those outside scholarships. For everyone outside of Washington State or even still in Washington State, your community is a really great place to look for a scholarship opportunity. Last year, our students brought in between $2 and $3 million in outside scholarships, and a lot of those came from those smaller community scholars, such as Rotary clubs or booster clubs or Girl Scouts, any of those things that you might be involved in. Those are really great opportunities for looking for those outside scholarship pieces. All right, so what's next? Well, we wish we knew, but Right now, your best option is, again, request that estimated financial aid offer. Really, beyond that, once we start getting official data and we're able to process things, we are going to do our best to get that information out to you, like I said. From there, really, your next steps would be to confirm your enrollment. And then, again, throughout the process, or even after you've confirmed, contacting us with any questions that come up along the way. Our contact information is here on the slide. And again, we're happy to answer any questions that you have along the way. So I think, do we have any questions? If so, go ahead and add them to the Q&A and we will start trying to answer those. And Sarah, feel free to jump in with anything that you might like to add.
Yeah, hey Kelly, I have a one for you, and I thought it would just be helpful to answer this one live. And the question is that the FAFSA status has been in processing since January. Can Gonzaga find out further detail for us?
That is a great question. One of the hot topics of today was we are not certain when we are going to be able to view student data within our systems as well. So we are unable to see information the same way that you are unable to see information right now. I do know that there is a backlog of the FAFSAs being processed. So, I mean, ultimately, we're under the impression that they're taking them from a first come, first served kind of approach. And they're really haven't given us a lot of guidelines as to, like, you know, what the rhyme or reason is to that. But ultimately, like I said, when it is processed, you should receive that email notification.
Awesome. Thank you. We're getting some more questions in the chat, and please feel free to continue to put them on there. We're going to answer them out loud, and we can answer them through the Q&A as well. If a student gets work study and works on campus during their time at GU, are they considered an employee? And if so, do any employee discounts apply?
That is a great question. Our status with student employees is that you are a student first, employee second. Obviously, your reason for being here is to be a student first and foremost. Our student employees only work about 10 to 15 hours a week, and they are not eligible for any benefits beyond sick and safe leave, which is a requirement through the Washington state. So no is the question to the discount piece, but there are, definitely is still other robust opportunities and benefits to working on campus.
Perfect. And the next question is, how do we know the status of our confirmed completed FAFSA?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will be quite frank in that I did a FAFSA for my husband so I could figure out all these pieces of how everything was going to work. And I just went today to go check. So when you have that studentaid.gov login, when you go back into that, you have a dashboard. And one of the things that listed there is what's called My Activity. When you go to that My Activity, you're going to end up what's called your FAFSA summary. So you'll see that there's a page there that kind of gives you a lowdown of all of the inputted information on your FAFSA. So once it is finally processed, you should be able to go back in there and see that in the My Activity and be able to pull up kind of the information that you put in there. There's a big red bar right there that says you cannot make corrections right now. And I know Sarah and I and others in our office will be incredibly grateful when that bar is not there anymore. But just know that right now there's no way for you to make those corrections, but you can at least see what was listed in there.
Awesome. And then this is the next one is, I think, a student or a parent that is referring to the estimated financial aid offer form. They state, I am trying to submit my form for a financial aid offer, and I have everything I need, but when I click upload file, nothing pops up to upload the screenshot from the email I got from the U.S. Department of Education. They've tried multiple solutions with still no luck, and they cannot submit the estimated financial aid form without the screenshot. What should they do?
Yeah, so if you're having trouble with the actual technical process of being able to upload that file, your best bet is actually just to email it to our office. We can take it from there and upload it on the backside, so we can make sure that it gets in there and gets processed the way that you would need to get that offer. So you can just email it to the finaid@gonzaga.edu email that's listed there on the slide still, and then we'll just make that update and put it into the system so we can get that processed for you.
Awesome. And another question, can you please clarify if both parents need to apply for FAFSA? They applied under their son's name. and the parents file their taxes jointly?
If you filed jointly, only one parent needs to be the contributor on the FAFSA.
If a student has a FAFSA if you have a student FAFSA in your system, are you releasing those financial aid packages beyond the estimate?
That is also a really great question. We are not at a place where we have that information in our system, but as soon as we have it in our system, we will begin processing that information in order to get finalized financial aid offers out.
And are Gonzaga grants only for a single academic year, or do they renew for all 4 years?
Okay, hold on, Alexa, before I answer that one, so don't turn that one off. Sarah, I know you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I just want to say that Kelly's absolutely right that as soon as one of the hard things about this is there's software upgrades that have to happen on our campus, and some of that testing can't be done until we can actually start pulling FAFSA data in. So we have started receiving FAFSA data from the Department of Education, but we haven't yet been able to load that into our systems, but hopefully we can really soon here. So getting financial aid packages out to students is our highest priority, and we will absolutely make that information available as soon as we possibly can. And I would love to sort of let you all know that's as easy as pressing a button, but there's a fair amount of logistics and matching. We got to make sure that we're matching the FAFSA applications up with the right record, and that we're comfortable communicating eligibility. So we want to not only give you financial aid offers, we want them to be reflective of your eligibility. So we're working as fast as we can, and it is our highest priority. But there's still a few hurdles and milestones we kind of have to clear to be able to make that information public.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, Alexa, I'm sorry. Could you repeat the last question?
Absolutely. So are Gonzaga grants only eligible for a single academic year, or do they renew for all 4 years?
Yeah, that is a really great question. So we have what's called the Gonzaga Guarantee here at Gonzaga, which is basically a policy that states that any of the Gonzaga financial aid that you have received during your as a new incoming student, that will carry for all 4 years. It will not be reduced for the 4 years that you're here. So Gonzaga grant is not just for the single year, but will carry for your time here at Gonzaga.
If a student family received an estimated financial aid offer, will there be a correction once the FAFSA delay is resolved?
There won't be a correction to the estimated financial aid offer. We would hope to be able to push that regular financial aid offer out to families. Sarah, do you want to speak a little bit about our policy that we have with that right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just actually typing another answer to a similar question. So if you received a financial aid estimate from Gonzaga, know that the Gonzaga aid that you were offered, so this would be the Gonzaga grant and of course the Gonzaga Academic Excellence Scholarship that your student was offered as part of their admission, that aid is sort of guaranteed. If you gave us good information, if your income is within $20,000, of what we receive on the FAFSA, you can sort of count on that. We want you to have confidence in those estimates and feel really good about knowing that that aid is going to be there. We will redetermine federal and state financial aid eligibility. We don't expect those to change a ton. In fact, we think some students might get more Pell Grant than what we were projecting based on some of the recalculations that have to be done. But again, we wouldn't do this process if we didn't have some confidence in the estimates that we're giving. So we will absolutely notify everyone of their financial aid eligibility based on FAFSA data when we have that. And for families for whom, maybe there was a big difference or there was something misreported or miscalculation, know that we will absolutely work with you to try to be as generous as we possibly can through this process.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question. Can you please explain what SAI means versus EFC? What does SAI actually mean?
That is a great question. So I think one of the things that has always been really challenging what's called the EFC, which is the expected family contribution, is that generated a number that really kind of terrified families because a lot of families felt like it was what they were going to have to pay in order to attend a school. And that is not really what the EFC ever was meant for. So as part of this FAFSA simplification, they decided to change that name and to something that made a little bit more sense. Sometimes we question how much more sense it made, but it became the Student Aid Index. And really what that does is when that's sent to an institution, we use that to determine what types of financial aid you're going to be eligible for. The formula for that to determine what your need is to take the cost of attendance of an institution minus that student aid index, and that really kind of gives us what is your need overall. So really, those things are the same, EFC, SAI, kind of the same thing. There's a lot of calculation changes that happened at the same time with the FAFSA simplification, so they made a lot of adjustments to that, but basically it replaced that EFC that you're speaking about.
Awesome. We've got another student who submitted an estimated financial aid offer, and since submitting the estimated offer form, their FAFSA has been processed and they received an SAI number and federal Pell Grant number. Should they resubmit their estimated financial aid offer?
Sarah, I'm going to let you field that one.
Yeah, that might be a good one to just email us.
Yeah.
And sort of explain exactly what you did in that question is just that the FAFSA has been processed. Congratulations. We're excited to do that for you, and to just email us that number to let us, to ask if it's going to change eligibility for anything. I think an email would probably be the best route for that.
Awesome. Thank you. If a student is in the 9th semester nursing program, will the financial aid continue for that 9th semester?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, your financial aid will continue into that 9th semester. We're very familiar with that process. Some students choose to go abroad, some students just choose to take a leave of absence, some just have that extra 9th semester. But ultimately, with that Gonzaga guarantee, we know that there are some situations that are going to arise, even for those outside of that 9th semester nursing program, where it may take longer than that traditional 4 years to complete your degree. And we work very diligently with our students to make sure that they have that funding continued until they are completed with their undergraduate degree.
Awesome. And I think we're at the last question for now. Some of you folks are still waiting for typed answers, and we'll get to those. But if you have any more, again, keep them coming. But if a student did not, or applied for and did not receive a tuition exchange, is that available for them to reapply for as an enrolled student? And if so, is it often granted to enrolled students?
Sarah, I'm going to let you field that one too.
I can do that. So we will consider applicants for the tuition exchange or FAFSA program for sophomores, juniors, seniors, but whether or not we have scholarships to offer depends on whether current students stay enrolled. So it is not very likely. Some years we don't have any scholarships to offer upperclassmen or sophomores, juniors, and seniors. It might just be 1 or 2. So you're certainly welcome to continue to apply, but it's not something that I would really count on after your freshman year, just because you're kind of dependent on somebody else's decision on whether or not it would be available.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question is, if a student is planning on doing a 4+1 program, for example, our engineering and MBA program, does financial aid continue to this 5th year or just the 4 years of undergrad?
It's just for the 4 years of the undergrad. Once they've received and have received their undergraduate degree, they are considered a graduate student, and the financial aid is different.
How likely is it for an out-of-state student to get a full ride?
That's a great question, Sarah. I'm going to let you field that one too.
It is. I would say it's not super likely. There's not a ton of full ride scholarships. We do have a Gonzaga Access Pledge that is a full tuition commitment. And that's a combination of the federal Pell Grant, the state grants, and aid from Gonzaga. Out-of-state students, it's just not super common. The very best thing you can do is submit the estimated financial aid offer to sort of get and see where your eligibility is at. So I don't want to completely dash hopes, because it's not as if it hasn't happened, but it's not super common.
Thank you. When is your best estimated date on when students and families can expect a final financial aid offer letter?
Boy, do we tell you exactly when it would be. I think with the latest, so there's a couple of things that are a little bit challenging at the moment. One is that there was an issue with the calculation that was announced on Friday that affects about 10% of the applications. And the Department of Education has to reprocess all those records. The other thing is the inability for students to make corrections is challenging because there's a lot of students that need to make corrections to their FAFSA application. So we're also waiting on computer updates. So mid to late April is my best guess at the moment. Know that we will get the 8 offers out as soon as we possibly can. And, you know, we're honestly, this is our highest priority and all that we're doing and thinking about and trying to figure out how to do this. But if you haven't done an estimated financial aid offer, that's your best and quickest avenue to getting sort of an estimate of what financial aid will look like. FAFSA-based awards, gosh, I would say April 20th if I had to pick a date right now. But there's still some major hurdles that we have to clear. The Department of Ed both has to clear, and also on campus, we have to clear before we can do that. And it's the way this process is going, it's just hard to really commit to a date. And I wish so badly I had a different answer, but I also want to be transparent about kind of what we're seeing from our end. I don't know, Kelly, do you have anything to add?
No, that was beautifully stated. Well done.
This next one is, and I think we'll maybe tag team it for a scholarship like Unity Scholars, which is for students within the state of Washington. Can you reapply next year if you didn't get accepted this year as a first-year student? So for Unity Scholars specifically, you cannot reapply into it. It is only available to students as seniors in high school applying to be a first-year student at Gonzaga. But maybe, Kelly, if you want to speak to how students may be eligible or find additional scholarships as they attend at Gonzaga or as they're,
Sure.
enrolled.
Yeah, thanks, Alexa. So ultimately, there is definitely opportunity for scholarships kind of as you're moving through the program. Anything that requires an application after you have become a student at Gonzaga, we usually put those announcements in what we call our morning mail. That's basically our news blast to students that we have daily to kind of fill them on what's going on at GU. So anything that would require a separate application for that, we would certainly list it there for students to apply for. A lot of our scholarships come from donors, and so we have a lot of criteria matching that we have to do. And so we've worked with a process as to where we award as many students as we can based upon the criteria that has been set. Again, for students that have been here after their incoming freshman year, to offer as much of that funding as we can to students during their program. Sarah, is there anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I apologize because I was typing in the answer.
Okay, perfect.
I'm sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do students and families need to do anything once the FAFSA is processed to get the information to us? Do we provide an update to those students and families on whether or not when we receive their FAFSA information?
Yes, Sarah, go ahead. I'm so eager.
No, you do not need to do anything to get the information to us. And yes, we will send, as soon as we start loading FAFSAs in the system, we'll have a sort of an automated email that goes out that confirms we received the FAFSA. That also is your indication that the FAFSA was linked up to the admissions application. And then hopefully once those emails start going out, it shouldn't be too long after we have financial aid offers to you. Probably at least a business week, maybe a couple business weeks, but that'll be a good check-in point for you all to know that things are moving on our end.
Thank you. For the estimated financial aid offer, when students are going in to request that and being prompted to log in, is that the student or the contributor, and is that the Gonzaga student login? So kind of to get the ball rolling, that would be the student's login for their application portal, which is where they receive their application or their admission decision. But Kelly, would you go into like what the steps are for students and their contributors to successfully submit the estimated request offer?
Absolutely. So it is kind of a two-step process because we want to make sure that we get really good information from you as a family to be able to do that estimated offer. So the first step is, again, for that student to log into their application portal and be able to complete that piece. One of the things that it does is it asks you to list the parent that is on your FAFSA or would be on your FAFSA in order to ask them for the additional information that we need. Basically what that is basically your household size and then also your adjusted gross income for the 2022 school year. And then we are utilizing that information along with that SAI index in order to be able to put that estimated financial aid offer. Again, if you don't have that SAI calculated, there is a place that you can indicate that you don't have it. You can still go through that process of adding your parent so they get the second piece. They still need to fill out that second piece. And in the meantime, you're going to get a follow-up that tells you to go through what's called the financial aid estimator, which is again through studentaid.gov. And that allows you to kind of estimate what your SAI would be. And then that screenshot is what we will use to kind of gather that data moving forward. So just know that even if you don't have an official SAI, you can still go through this process.
Will GU honor the estimated financial aid if multiple government problems with the FAFSA continue?
Great question, Sarah.
Absolutely honor the Gonzaga-based financial aid. And I am certain we have a really incredible partner in this state program, and I'm certain that they will come up with a solution to help us honor any state aid that was communicated, or to the best of our ability. I also think the U.S. Department of Education will fix these problems. And, you know, there's still some time between now and when funds actually are dispersed to students' accounts. So that there's still plenty of time to kind of get some of those issues worked out. So to summarize, yes, absolutely to Gonzaga aid, very likely for state and federal aid. There'll be workarounds that will allow us to sort of honor those commitments to students as well, but we will continue to keep you posted, and we're making progress in the right direction. I think that's an important thing to note, is that there have been a lot of milestones cleared, and as frustrating as this is, and as frustrating as the pace of the improvements in the process is, things are sort of headed in the right direction. So I'm not overly concerned about the FAFSA not working forever and ever. I do think it's going to get helped here, but we will absolutely honor the Gonzaga aid that we communicated through this process.
Yeah.
Awesome. Does the federal loan for $5,500 refer to only the direct subsidized loan, and will there be possible additional unsubsidized federal loans for first-year students?
Also a really great question. $5,500 is actually the full amount that you can receive, and that could come in the form of subsidized and unsubsidized. So $3,500 is actually what you would be able to receive in subsidized loan funding. $2,000 would be unsubsidized loan funding if you qualify for subsidized. If you don't qualify for subsidized loan funding, $5,500 is ultimately what you would receive in unsubsidized loan funding. We did not, if you're speaking to the estimated financial aid offer, we didn't kind of divvy that out because $5,500 is the total regardless of whether it's subsidized or unsubsidized. But if you do qualify for that subsidized loan, we would certainly add that for the $3,500 it could be.
And I would just add, if you are interested in pursuing other loan opportunities beyond the $5,500 added, there is a federal Parent Plus loan program where students borrow on behalf of their students. Generally, that application becomes available in mid-April. I don't think that timeline will slip too much. It's sort of separate processes. So I think by the end of next month, it should be available if that's something you would like to apply for. And students can also borrow in the private loan programs through financial institutions as well. So once the federal direct loan eligibility is utilized, that's typically the two routes we see families going if they need to borrow additional funds.
Awesome. Will an out-of-state student be considered a Washington resident after attending GU for at least 1 year and then apply for any in-state scholarships?
Great question. So when it comes to state-specific aid, it actually goes off of the parent's state of residency. So The answer to your question is no, you would not be able to be a Washington State resident. There are some guidelines as to how you're considered a resident in the state of Washington. But we do also look at that parent residency because that is where your quote unquote home is.
Awesome. If a family has 2 students in college, does the SAI output remain the same, or does the FAFSA consider this, and how does Gonzaga handle this situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So historically, for those of you who may be familiar with FAFSA, one of the questions was number in college. And so they would take the expected family contribution and kind of split it in half to kind of mirror the fact that you have that in college. That went away with the FAFSA simplification. So as straight SAI, no, it does not take it into consideration. However, Gonzaga will go through that appeal process to determine if there's any additional aid that can be awarded if you do have more than one student in college.
Awesome. And can you speak to the interest rate in terms of taking out a federal loan for student loans?
Oh, Sarah, it's been a hot minute since I've looked at interest rates, so I'm going to let you field that one too.
The subsidized mean that the government essentially pays the interest for students while they're in school. So the interest rate is 5.5% 6 months after they leave or graduate on the subsidized loan program. The unsubsidized loan program, the interest rate is 5.5%, and that can accrue interest while the student's in school. We would encourage students to make interest-only payments. I could go on and on about the terms, but just a couple of highlights. Repayment begins 6 months after students leave or graduate. No payments are required while the student's in school, enrolled at least half time. It tends to be one of the more consumer-friendly loans that is available to students. It doesn't require a credit history. It really is just the FAFSA application that would qualify someone for those loans. So there's tons of information on studentaid.gov or gonzaga.edu/loans that sort of compares a few of the different loan types that we've talked about here.
Awesome. And I think we got through all of them right on time. So huge thank you to Kelly and Sarah and Helen in financial aid, and of course my colleague Claire. Just wanting to reiterate that we at Gonzaga are really here to support students and their families throughout this process. It is always a complicated process, and these delays have made it even more complicated and sometimes a little bit more stressful, and we just want to help in any way we can. So on the slide still, you see how to get in contact with our financial aid colleagues. I'm going to ask Claire if she can put in the chat the link to get connected with your admission counselor. Please feel free to always use us as a resource. And then I also just want to highlight that all of our webinars are being recorded and are posted typically within 24 to 48 hours of the webinar on our website. And Claire, I'll also ask you to put the link there on where students can find the recording of all of our webinars. We are hosting several more throughout the spring, some on finding community, some on career and professional development, our pre-professional tracks. So please, again, keep an eye on those pages to get connected with us. We want to just support you in any way we can. And hope everyone has a great night.
Thank you, everyone.